Okay. So as you know, this event is all about problem solving, and we chose this topic because this is something that is relevant to everyone, whether we're job seekers or working professionals. So the ability to problem solve and have those problem solving skills and experience is really high up on the list of hiring managers for almost any role they're going to be interviewing for. And it's also something that I think we've all probably learned that we need to be able to do on the job. So today we're going to hear from a couple of people who will each give a 10 minute plus lightning talk on an approach that they use to deal with the problem or a challenge or a situation in the workplace. I just want to note, initially we had 3 presenters slated for this, and unfortunately there was a hydroplaning incident with a family member of the person who was going to be our first presenter, who was going to speak on voice of the customer, and everyone's okay, but unfortunately he wasn't able to make the call. So I do want to note that we will take questions at the end. So as Jeff and Arman go through their presentations, if you have a question, note the slide number and the question. You can enter it in the chat. We'll be managing the chat, or just keep a note of it. And there will be plenty of time at the end of the 2 talks. We're going to have like a roundtable discussion, time for Q&A, time to hear comments from you. So I think we're good. So we'll go to our first presenter, who is Jeff Charatan. And Jeff is an experienced technology solutions leader who improves business by leveraging data. And his background includes the wireless and telecommunications industries. And he has significant experience in business intelligence, data management, and application development. Jeff delivers insight and understanding to an organization using one of its most important assets, which is data. So Jeff is going to talk about data quality management. So Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Marla. Just want to do a check here. You guys see the presentation okay? Okay, so let's jump in. Let me just move this out of the way. Okay, guys, so in today's world, the question isn't if, but really how much bad data is in your organizations and what kind of impacts is it having on your business? So what is the cost of bad data? So let me just give you a few samples here. $3.1 trillion is IBM's estimate of the annual cost of poor data quality in the US. 20 to 30% of operating expenses are directly related to data. And this last stat, 1/3 of analysts spend up to 40% of their time vetting and validating data. And if you think about that, that's a fairly huge number when you think about the number of employees in an organization that might be performing analysis on the data within that organization. So here are some of the consequences of bad data. You've got poor decision making. You got garbage in, garbage out. I'm sure you've all heard of that. All bad data flowing through your system can amount to inaccurate reporting and pointless data science initiatives. Business inefficiencies. So for example, poor data quality can lead to delays in payment processing, causing cash flow problems. Bad data can also drive an extra large amount of calls into your customer service organization. This one I find to be really the most important, and it comes down to mistrust. If your business leaders don't trust the data to make critical decisions, then that's a problem. It only takes a small problem to shake someone's trust in your data. Bad data can have an impact on your reputation, the company's reputation, both internally and externally. And the last item here, lost revenue, missed opportunities. Missed opportunities can be caused by not offering the right products and services to your customer at the right time. And bad data can also lead to revenue leakage due to poor billing data. So now that we understand a little bit more about the cost and consequences of bad data, let's shift our focus to prevention using data quality management. So I'll keep it, if you hear me say DQM, I'm just shortening the data quality management. So DQM refers to a business principle that requires a combination of having the right people, the right processes, and the right technologies, all with a common goal of improving the measures of data quality that matter to your organization or to an organization. On the right, you'll see that data quality management is one of several pillars that fall under the data management framework that's defined by the Data Management Association, known as DAMA. And you'll see here, you see at the center there, there's data governance, which really is part of every one of these pillars. Okay, so how can you assess the quality of your data? You want your data to meet the 6 dimensions, what they call the 6 dimensions of data quality. Metrics can be defined for each dimension. So the first dimension is completeness, and that's really the proportion of stored data against the potential for being 100%. So really just ask the question, is the data all there? Uniqueness states that there should be no duplicate data reported. Each of the records should be unique. Timeliness is the degree to which data is available when required. Validity, data is valid when it conforms to the syntax of its definition. Accuracy is the degree to which data correctly reflects real-world objects or events being described. And then lastly is consistency, which applies synchronization of data across tables and applications within your organization. So my experience with data quality comes from the wireless industry. One of my more recent experiences was working in IT, supporting applications and analytics associated with a point-of-sale system. The core point-of-sale system produces, or this one produced an average of 200,000 orders per day. These orders included those for service, bill payment, returns, purchases of devices, phones, and as well as accessories. The chart on the right shows some of the data categories and data quality dimensions associated with the hundreds of data points for those particular orders. While there were always challenges with the data that the system produced, it wasn't until there was an escalation related to tax and signature capture that we felt we had to take something more of a proactive approach to ensuring that we had a higher degree of data quality. Specifically, all device sales done on installment plans required a customer signature. During an audit, it was determined that there was a defect rate of 3% that needed to be addressed. So really what that means is for every 100 qualified orders that we had, 3 of them were missing signatures of consent. A project was launched to develop a data integrity monitor framework to identify issues closer to the time that they were created. So in order to solve the data quality problem, we leveraged a common data quality framework that's comprised of 6 recurring steps. So let me just hit on them. So the first step includes data discovery, which is really the process of finding, collecting, and reporting about the metadata associated with your data about data. Second step is data profiling, which is the process of analyzing your data in greater detail, calculating statistics, and reporting on the measures of quality for the data at a given point in time. Data rules is the business and technical rules that the data must adhere to in order to be considered high in quality. Data monitoring is the ongoing monitoring of data quality based on the results of executing those rules that we just defined in the prior step, and then comparing it to results and see how they compare to defined error thresholds. Data remediation is the ongoing correction of data quality exceptions and issues as they are reported. And lastly is just the data quality reporting. That's sort of the ongoing reporting, the dashboards, scorecards that are used to trend those data quality measures. So this is a high-level overview of the data integrity monitor framework created to address the challenge. The process revolves around the data integrity monitor engine that you see here in the center. This reflects the daily processes that run shortly after midnight that would focus on the prior day's order activity. The point-of-sale database shown in the upper left are scanned looking for specific defects or predefined rules found in the data integrity monitor database in the lower left. So for every defect threshold, they're checked to see if for every defect and anomaly, the thresholds are checked to see if they're essentially crossed. Down in the lower right, results from daily runs are shared with key stakeholders through dashboards, scorecards, reporting, as well as alerting for those defects that require immediate attention. And then lastly, not all defects need to be remediated, but for those that do, the production support team will work with key stakeholders to identify a root cause and schedule a fix to update the code as well as the data if applicable. Okay, so here is just a couple of screenshots of some of the dashboards that we created, but really I want to just touch on the results achieved. We were able to deliver the initial software that we put together for the what we called our data integrity monitor. We were able to deliver that in under 2 months. After 6 months, we were monitoring over 150 data points for defects. We were able to remediate 85% of those defects in less than 5 days after discovery. A byproduct of this, we were able to take some of those data quality rules that were defined, that we were checking after the fact, after the data was created. We were able to work with our quality assurance team in IT and develop test cases up front, so helping to ensure that those defects don't become recurring and work their way through the system again. And then if we go back and look at the one I mentioned earlier about the 3% defect rate that we had with signature capture, we were able to reduce that down to a consistent 0.2% from a defect rate. Okay. So the solution I shared was for software that was developed in-house, but there are also software solutions that can be purchased from vendors who specialize in this space. So when looking for data quality solution providers, you want to deliver software or deliver a product that has immediate impact and shows a noticeable improvement. You want to leverage both real-time and historical details. The system we provided was not a real-time system. You want a system that has the ability to leverage some new technologies such as predictive analytics or modeling and forecasting. And of course, and lastly, you want a system that can scale as your business grows as well. So as data explodes across the business, the focus on data quality is more important than ever. So I just want to highlight a couple best practices. One would be to start small, whether you start with one application. I mean, that's what we did. We started with one application, but you can perhaps start with one subject area, maybe focusing on the customer, working with many applications that touch the customer. Understand that data quality is an ongoing process. It's never over. You're always going to be introducing new data into your system, new functions. Focus on data quality goals. Okay, is it to increase profits, reduce costs? Target data quality issues that have high payback, such as the one I noted earlier, the signature capture one. We could have been in violation of some compliance issues if we didn't get that rectified, which of course would have cost the company money. Data owners and data stewards must own the process. It's not something that just one guy can work on in the back room. You got to get the key players involved. And there's also more than one solution, as I've sort of demonstrated here, when trying to solve for or implement data quality management. So just in closing, as data quality management, it helps you to tell better stories with your data. So again, thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you very much, Jeff. You got some people clapping, but you couldn't hear because they were muted. So
thank you, guys.
Excellent. So thank you, Jeff. And then our next presenter is Arman Bimatov. And Arman is a co-founder and chief product officer at TravelWits. So he leads products that utilize AI to help travelers find door-to-door, so flight, hotel, bus, train, car parking, and more. Door-to-door trips that are fully optimized around user preferences, corporate policies, and more. Arman has been into building apps for web since middle school. And after graduating from Penn State University with a BS in Information Science and Technology, he co-founded TravelWits. So Arman is going to talk to us about design sprints. So Arman,
Thank you. Can you hear me? and I lost audio for some reason. Could someone say something?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
We can hear you
All good.
too.
Yeah, I can hear myself. All right, let's see here. So first, I actually added a slide while during the meeting, and wanted to make a correction, slight correction. Natalie said, I think Natalie encouraged everyone to talk about anything that they're a subject matter expert. And I just want to let everyone know that I do not consider myself a subject matter expert. Instead, I'll just talk about my own experience doing something, and I hope that helps everyone. In general, my level of knowledge in a lot of fields, I consider myself probably either peak of Mount Stupid or Valley of Despair right here. So I'm encouraging everyone else, regardless of where you are on this curve, to kind of pitch in and share your experiences. So that's my 2 cents for the Work Search Buddy Network. All right. So hello everyone. I'm here to share a little bit about my first time running a design sprint. I'll talk about what it is as well. And I'm a co-founder, as Marla said, and chief product officer at TravelWits, and we're a travel startup that uses AI to find multimodal door-to-door trips. Um, so, as COVID-19 hit, just like everyone else, myself and my travel startup, we're in the middle of right in the middle of a joint product project with a partner and a strategic partner. And like everyone else on the planet, we realized that we need to adapt to the new situation. And we've after some meetings, we decided to build a new product. So the question was, as a product manager, I was trying to figure out what is the right way to kick off a new product. I've done it in the past, and there's always been some kinks. There's always been some disconnects when talking to the customers after spending 6 months building a product. You go to the customer, and all of a sudden it just you realize that it doesn't click. It's not quite right. So I was thinking, trying to understand what's the right way to kind of nip the problem in the right spot. So you know I was thinking what's important for the product kickoff. So and I realized, kind of after thinking about it, the criteria for success, to me at the time, seemed to be we needed to agree on our team and our partner, strategic partner. We needed to agree. We needed to prioritize, and we need to validate three main things. User challenges, business challenges, and potential solutions that can work, feasible. So, with that in mind, I started. I realized it's something that I've recently read about a lot, could potentially help the design sprint. So, the idea of the design sprint process or framework is to go from a high level challenge statement to a testable solution within just a matter of a few days. Usually it's 5 days. There's also 4 days and three-day versions. We did a 3-day version. So, my experience that I'm going to be going through is based on a 3-day version. On Monday, usually the team focuses on understanding the user journey, the problem space, and decides which specific challenges do they want to focus on. So that's on Monday. Tuesday, the team uh, focuses on those specifics, solution challenges, and sketches out competing solutions that could potentially be used. And then Wednesday, everyone decides on the best solution together, votes and decides. Then Thursday is spent on building a realistic prototype. So usually, a designer might be involved in that, an engineer. And then on Friday, you test the solution with an actual set of users that you've pre-scheduled before you started the design sprint. So this kind of forces you to, gives you a really good deadline. Deadlines are really great for stuff like this. So once I convinced myself, the team, that we needed to do this, I started preparing for the design sprint. So again, I just showed you the 5-day version, but I was preparing for a 3-day version. So, I started by binging on pretty much every design sprint video I could get my hands on. It's easy to get lost, but in retrospect, I think it really, really helped me submerged me into the topic and prepared me really well. I could have probably watched less of those, but it's better to be more prepared. Then I started thinking through the process kind of end to end, and then following all the resources. I just started to put something together on the virtual whiteboard, because we did end up doing this virtually. And I laid out all the exercise, played through the whole thing, kind of dry ran through the whole thing many times, and iterated over and over and over. They typically suggest spending, I think, 10, 20 hours on this. I probably spent 40, 50, if you discount the kind of the initial reading before I started preparing for this. So I'm just giving you just a few exercises because we don't have enough time, and I'm not really the best expert to explain every exercise. So, day one, after the initial, can you hear me type thing, all the rituals that we have these days on Zoom meetings, I give a quick overview of the design sprint exercise. And we started with something called the map exercise. And this is basically a diagram. You all together, we draw a diagram of the end-to-end experience of the main actors in the system. So it could be, customers, it could be your partners, it could be, support agents and things like that. I drew the map beforehand, so we didn't waste too much time during the meeting. We kind of just discussed it, confirmed, and we decided to focus on a specific area. So, for example, on this map, we could say, let's improve the challenges related to enrolling into therapy, for example. Then I went over all the key findings from what we've learned about the problem space before the design sprint, because we've had a lot of conversations before we actually started the design sprint. We've had conversations with users, with stakeholders, with the management, to gather a lot of information. So we kind of laid all of that out as well, discussed it, covering key challenges of users, important details of the user flow, and things like that. And I also gave the opportunity to for everyone to ask questions to the experts in the room, to find out more, to clarify certain assumptions. And that's why it's really important to have the right people in the room during that design sprint, so that they can answer the questions. You don't need to refer to someone outside of the room. At this step, it's really easy for the whole thing to go off the rails if you don't kind of address the elephant in the room. Sometimes you can kind of be too idealistic, or make some incorrect assumptions. So it's definitely from my own experience. And then while the experts talk about this, and everyone asks questions related to the problem space, everyone in the room uses this format to write down notes, and we do it in like sticky notes. So the format is called "How might we?" So, for example, if someone says users really struggled, 80% of users we interviewed struggled with, collaboration during trip planning. So then you say, how might we make trip planning more collaborative? And you write it down on a sticky note. So then, it came down to something called lightning demos and solution sketches. I didn't want to stretch the meeting, so I asked everyone, I instructed everyone how to create and submit lightning demos. And then I asked everyone to kind of go home with homework and basically prepare those on their own. So what are these? Lightning demos are basically inspiration for sketches, or what can we steal from others? What works? And everyone collects some examples from other products, takes screenshots, write down notes, and then post it on that virtual whiteboard for everyone to see. And then after that, after everyone looks at those lightning demos, at the inspiration, and comes up with some sketches of what these our potential solutions might look like. So then everyone looks at the at everything that was discussed, comes up with a potential solution sketch, and those can range from words on paper, or like a really beautifully designed screen like you see on the page. It doesn't really matter. It's really, what I found on my own experience is that every little sketch, no matter how how poorly it was drawn, it was really, really useful into getting into someone's head about their understanding of their perspective of the problem and solution. Then we voted for these solution sketches, voted for the best ones, and then once the vote was done, pretty much everyone left the room, and only the designer remained in the room, and spent pretty much the rest of the day 2 and part of the day 1 actually prototyping, making a high fidelity version of that best voted solution sketch. And we used Figma for that. Then we, after a few more tweaks on the day 3, we tested it with pre-scheduled users. They went through the prototype with a task in mind and shared their thoughts aloud. This is something that there's tons of resources online about how to do proper usability testing. We wrote down our findings in a similar fashion to the screen, where we said what worked, what didn't work for each user. And basically from there, we kind of iterated over the prototype, try to validate it more, and went to actually build it. So we're actually in the middle of building that solution. It was fun, a ton of momentum for the team, solution in 3 days. And my main advice is lots of dry runs, be flexible. I was actually changing the whole schedule as we were going through the design sprint on the fly, which is very stressful. So that's the other point of advice, is never show that you're stressed out. So always pretend like you're the expert and you know what you're doing. Like, for example, right now I know I've ran over by 3 minutes, but I'm pretending like everything's fine. And these are my 2 main resources that I use to prepare. I think we'll be sending out links later. Yeah, thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much. And it was only 1 minute 44 seconds that you went over. So
okay.
You did good. Not bad. Good. Well, thank you both. Thank you, Arman, and thank you, Jeff, and everyone. I'm just gonna change the view so I can see everyone. I'm sure people have questions for Jeff and for Arman. I'm just gonna, before we get to those, I'm gonna ask them a couple of questions, and then we can open it up to you guys. I didn't see any questions in the chat, but if you have questions, enter them in, or, I think this is a small enough group, you can just unmute and start asking the question. But Jeff, let's start with you. So you mentioned like defects in data. So there's kind of 2 parts to this. Can you give some more examples of what that could look like? And then I was just wondering, is there a way to prioritize the defects that you need to fix? Like, is there like a process or an approach for prioritizing them?
So let me start with the second part first. So how to prioritize. And again, it's going to depend on the organization that you're in. It's usually for us, it was more the squeaky wheel methodology, right? So if there was a defect that had a larger impact on revenue. We had an issue. One of the prompts to get this process off the ground was some challenges with tax. We were having tax mismatches on about $3 million per month that needed to be addressed for obvious reasons. So guess what? That became a priority. So it's usually those ones that have, certainly that have revenue impact, as well as some that have customer impact. But if it's, if it's, a challenge with email addresses, it's gonna, maybe it's a big challenge, maybe not. It's gonna depend on the number of defects that you have. So again, it's usually driven by the business. And in my experience, it's been closely tied to those that either have direct revenue impact or customer satisfaction issues. As far as some other examples, really anywhere that data comes into play, you could have a challenge with it. But if you think back, I had a slide up that showed the 6 dimensions of data quality, right? So one was completeness, and that was the one that really the signature capture one the example that I used sort of aligned with that dimension, right? Because if you think about it from an order perspective for, let's say for a new wireless phone, in order for that order to be considered complete, you needed to have that signature capture piece, that acknowledgement, and that wasn't there. So, if you think about, that's an example for completeness. If you think about an example for uniqueness, if you have something very simple as a product table, a product entity that has every product that you have in your inventory. And I've seen it, and I'm sure some of you have seen this before. You might see something in there twice for the same product. Maybe it has a different product ID, but that's duplicate data. Even though it's got a different key, logically to your users, they're going to see that in there twice, and that's going to cause some challenge with downstream analytics. So that's an example of uniqueness. And then the last, I'll give you another example in the from an accuracy perspective. That's usually the toughest one to solve for because it's somewhat subjective. So if I go back to the example I had with email addresses or birthdays and things like that you have in your database, you're going under the assumption that it's right, but you don't necessarily know until, I'm sure we've all gotten those postcards in the mail that says, hey, happy birthday or something. And I'll get it in July. Meanwhile, my birthday's in December. So you kind of wonder where they got this information. Well, that's not necessarily going to potentially bring a business to its knees. But if you think about that on a larger scale, it's a problem. It's a wasted communication. And if you're doing that, maybe with data that has a higher visibility, it can lead to challenges.
It's funny that you bring up about birth dates because I had learned from someone to never use your actual birth date when you're providing your information. So I myself have given, I have a go-to date. I think I've shaved 15 years off of my age. I have my alternate birth date that I use, but that's interesting. And I imagine it was something related to revenue, but that also makes sense, customer satisfaction, which ultimately ties into revenue. So thank you for that. And Arman, I was wondering, like, in what situations would people use design sprints? Like, how did you determine that this was right for you and your company? Are there certain factors that people should consider looking at to assess if this is the right tool for them to use?
Yeah. So one of use cases for a design sprint is definitely like a product kickoff situation where you're trying to build some, solve some problems for users, and you're trying to understand what would the solution look like, and not just the solution, but also what would the MVP look like. So how can I build like the smallest thing possible, the least costly thing possible to solve the most important problem for the users. There's definitely a few other use cases, when it can be applied to a lot of different things. If you're trying to understand which maybe direction to go into to take your business, or decide to on a strategy, or even, let's apply it to marketing. Uh, you might want to run a design sprint to understand who your target user would be. If you have a hypothesis about different personas, you might say, let's focus on narrowing this down on the user. Um, so it's really wide, kind of wide array of problems that this can be applied to. It's really about, you know, driving from a problem to a solution. I will say that um, sometimes it might be an overkill, because you do need to bring really important people into the room for multiple days, and this can be difficult. So if you're, obviously doing something small like designing a new feature for a website, it might not be a good thing to do, to use a design sprint. Or the other thing I think is also, if you don't know anything yet, you know if you don't have any context whatsoever, it might also be better to spend some time to understand the context a little bit better, like interview some users, talk to some stakeholders before, look at competitors before you start a design sprint. So I don't know, hope that helps.
It does, and I'm wondering, is there an aspect about like company culture that comes into play, or company size? Like, is this something that like an established large corporation would consider, like a department within would consider, or is this, or are there? I get that you're speaking from your experience, and but just from what your sense of it,
Yeah.
do you have an idea if there's has greater affinity with different types of companies or company cultures?
Well, it's interesting because in my experience, I was able to kind of, it was kind of a hybrid situation because we're a startup, like a 5-person startup. So obviously for us, it's an easier thing to convince, all 5 of us to spend our time on this. But we did it with our strategic partner, which is actually a mid-sized organization, and we did it with their executives. So that was interesting. Like I said, it's kind of a hybrid situation because they're a much larger organization, and they have obviously important things to do. It's a little bit harder to convince, but they were all in. I think the culture definitely matters. I think it's first thing is trust. If you're we have great relationship with our strategic partner, they trust us as the kind of they trust that we wouldn't waste their time, basically, as a short answer.
It's an interesting point.
Yeah, but I guess the other thing that's important to say is that this was created inside Google, which obviously is a big company.
I didn't realize that.
But they created it for startups initially. They had something called Google Ventures, and they were applying it to startups that they were partnering with. But then they started actually running this after they kind of worked out the kinks, created this design sprint framework. They started using it in big companies like Airbnb, Google themselves, and and others.
Oh, that's interesting. So it kind of started with the thinking that it was appropriate for startups, and then they saw value in using it outside of that. So
and pretty much
really cool.
I think there's a lot of examples of startup-y things that eventually make it into big companies as well, like even lean, right? It all started with startups trying to be lean, and now pretty much every huge organization is trying to be lean as well.
Yeah, lean and agile, those are like definitely buzzwords. So cool. Thank you. I want to give people a chance to ask Jeff and Arman questions. I didn't see anything in the chat. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions, or even if you have a comment about an approach that you've used that you just want to share with the group and mention, we would welcome that as well. So, David, did you just unmute or?
Yeah, why not?
Okay.
I'll start off. And I was going to ask Jeff a question, and not being intimately familiar with the signature capture process, but I just it from my vantage point, it sounded like you had missing signatures, I guess, as your original slide indicated, in 3% of the cases. Was there any investigative work, or I guess probably a better way to describe it would be root cause analysis to determine first and foremost that it was a data issue and not, maybe user oversight or some other potential problem that caused the lack of data capture or signature capture?
Yeah, so in that example, the customer was doing what they needed to do. Actually, this was done, the organization I was in, there were many vehicles to do an order, whether it's online or it was in a store or through a channel partner or something along that line. In this case, the majority of the issues happen to be coming through the internet. People that were placing orders on the internet, and they had to click a box to accept the T's and C's, right? The terms and conditions associated with the offer. And while the front end application, which was a separate application maintained by a separate organization, collects all that information and passes it along to the point of sale organization where the order could be built and processed and fulfilled. It was getting lost along that path. So conceptually, the customer was happy. They did what they needed to do. The folks up front, they were able to see the order from the internet side. Everything looked great, and the customer went on the way. It ended up getting fulfilled. But on the back end, just that acceptance record was never getting created. So we were able to kind of pick up. The good thing in that scenario, we were able to find we know what orders were impacted. We did work with the internet folks. They had on their side, they had the record of acceptance or just something indicating that there was acceptance. So we were able to update the orders on our side from a remediation perspective, and then we were good going forward. But there are always going to be, especially in a large organization like the one we were in, there's always going to be little things falling through the cracks. I mean, they still had some acceptance records that could be done via paper, right? So you're signing a form basically that you're agreeing to the terms and conditions. And that's usually if there was a problem, if there was a systems problem at one of our stores or something like that, we can still get the customer in and out of the store quickly.
I had a question actually as well for Jeff.
Sure.
How do you do data quality management? How do you apply that incrementally? We just talked about lean and everything. What would be the thought process?
Right. So if you think back, I had a slide that showed some of the framework that we use, where we kind of went through and did some upfront data profiling, where we started looking at some of the data, looking at the frequency of certain values and things like that, looking just old-fashioned. And some of it has to do with just people having a hunch, where they, when you're dealing with the data owners and the subject matter experts, understanding that there might be a challenge, that's where you want to start to focus in on. And the tool that we built, it was quite easy for us to quickly set up an anomaly or a defect scenario, define the rules, put them in place once we understood where the potential pitfall was. So a lot of it just still comes down to detective work. You got to know your data, and you got to know where the pitfalls are. We were finally able to start partnering with the development folks, and as enhancements were coming down, we were looking at what they were planning, what new data was, or what changes they were making to structure, what new changes were coming in, and figuring out well, is this an opportunity for failure, essentially? Do we need to build something in place? So that's how we were kind of addressing that particular issue.
Thank you.
Great. And there's a question in the chat for Arman from David, and it's, did you have a Scrum Master and daily scrums?
No, so that's actually a bit of a misconception. The design sprint is only accidentally called the sprint, but it actually has nothing to do with the agile sprint. So the only similarity is that it's, like 5 days, but there's no Scrum Master. There's no, daily stand-ups. It's not a development agile sprint. It's, totally different thing. It's just called sprint for some reason.
But if I may continue on this topic, do you think if you were looking for someone to run this design sprint, someone with the skills of a Scrum Master would be the right person, or what would be the right skills for someone to run this sprint, Arman? So
I guess the equivalent of a Scrum Master and the design sprint would be called just a facilitator, and that someone the skills. Probably just skills running workshops, but also, meaning ability to organize people, keep track of time and things like that. But also, I think part of it is also the prep work required. And then during that prep work, you might need to do user research. So I would say probably, the classic roles that would apply to that are product manager maybe, and UX UI designers, or like that overlap there.
Speaking of UX, we also have someone here on the call, Adriel, who just introduced himself as someone who is changing careers from as interesting as being a trainer in a martial arts into UX design. Interesting, really, right? Adriel, can you introduce yourself maybe? Do you have any questions?
Let me see. Hello.
Hi.
I'm just gonna try to get the video on.
Hi.
Hi.
That's interesting. Can you tell us about yourself a little bit? It was such a dramatic career change.
Yeah, I mean, throughout like college, in college I did psychology and I was big into research. I really enjoy that. And when I was teaching martial arts, leading the school, I found that there's a lot of overlap between just general usability and trying to connect with the clients to what UX designers do. I was always interested in tech, and then this year, March, I decided to do a certification in UX design through Design Lab. I finished in September, and I've been working on contract roles and like websites for small companies while searching for more of a full-time position in the bigger company. Yeah, so mainly my like journey into UX design started with curriculum design, running meetings for my martial arts coworkers, stuff like that. So yeah.
Cool, interesting. What brought you to this meeting? Were you looking to hear about design sprints? Have you heard this term before?
Yes, I heard about design sprints, lean method, design thinking. My last position in for Adventures, the Swedish startup, I was acting as lead UX designer. So we were running like maybe a variant of the kind of Scrum meetups. We were really small as well. We were about 5 people. We're spread across the world, so meetups were pretty difficult. We did stand-ups every week. And yeah, that's my extent of experience with like Scrum and anything like that.
Then I have a question for both you and Arman. What tools would you recommend if someone wants to do quick prototypes? Which tools would you recommend using?
For me, I work exclusively with Figma. I feel like Figma is very quick to get your prototypes out. You could also like get the engineers to inspect, like use the inspect tool on Figma as well. So it's a little bit easier than having a second plugin. Like what we would use is something called Zeppelin. I've had trouble with Zeppelin in the past, but I highly recommend Figma.
I
Arman, what's
definitely, as a product manager and not a designer, definitely agree with Figma because, you know, in the past, like in the past 5 years, I've used like something called Paint.net, and it's kind of embarrassing to say out loud.
So you can mention.
But it's and I've tried, you know, kind of like, okay, I need to be more productive with my tools as a makeshift designer. And I tried a bunch of different stuff, you know. I tried like Sketch and something else, and all of that was just so kind of not intuitive to a non-designer. And then Figma, you know, once I discovered Figma, it was just so, you know, easy to use. It was so intuitive as a non-designer. For prototyping also, I have used InVision, which is also very easy to use. You just kind of draw hotspots where something is clickable, and then it's basically just an image. And so you could, for example, you can draw stuff with pencils, upload it to InVision, draw, you know, on your pencil mockup, and, you know, saying this is a button, and that leads to another pencil sketch. So it's, you know, kind of easy to set things up for prototyping. So those are the two tools. The other thing I think also I've seen people use, and I've used myself, is just a plain old PowerPoint, because it also has these animation capabilities and navigation capabilities. So nothing wrong with that, I think.
Yeah, that's
The
usually
last
my tool of choice.
the last one is Bubble.io, but I had very limited exposure to that. But it's definitely low code, no code. I feel like those tools are definitely gaining a lot of traction, and they're going to be all the talk in the next few years.
Bubble.io.
Yeah.
Have you heard this, Adriel?
No, I haven't heard of that.
No, definitely check it out.
Arman always explores and finds out some new stuff, really cutting edge stuff.
That's the only way to survive.
That's true. So we have here representatives from like two worlds, I would say. Jeff represents the corporate world with large, huge projects. And Arman and Adriel, you guys represent the world of startups, very lean, very nimble, right? All oriented towards product management rather than project management. And product means you need to do design, quick prototyping, validating, where with Jeff, these projects, they initiate somewhere like out of huge need for a business that is there for a while. Now, the next stage is when the company as a whole starts understanding that, hey, there is some certain need in it. So my question to Jeff is, Jeff, do you remember, were you there in the company when people just started acknowledging that there is a problem, we need to do something about it? What was the journey between just starting to understand that there is a problem, being aware of that, to actually deciding to go into this project?
Well, you're asking about this specific data quality project, or just in general, the challenge that corporate is having by, just the old the older way of thinking, the waterfall mentality of these projects going for 6 or 7 months, or embracing some kind of agile framework.
In general, it actually, yes, it's interesting to me. What's the journey typically from where the company starts being aware of, hi, there is a problem here, really need to do something about it, until when the company actually decides to start implementing something?
Right. Well, I would probably say was probably, and again, in my experiences, was in telecommunications with Verizon. This probably, I would say, maybe 10 to 15 years ago. was just, becoming a challenge in terms of getting projects done. Large enhancements. I was on the wireless side, which obviously was the hot side of the business, right? Everybody was where phones used to be a luxury, they became a necessity. Everybody was having one. So sales were great. It's just we couldn't keep up with the ways to sell the products and services that were coming into play. This was, right around the time 4G was being ready to be launched. So the company really did put a lot of money behind, they called it their transformation initiative, and it was really to get everybody on board with understanding an agile frameworks, Scrum methodology. It was sort of kind of a hybrid approach. They sort of took some components from the best of several worlds to put their approach together, and it really took probably about 5 or 6 years before they really got into a good cadence where everybody from the business as well as IT was getting the training that they needed to understand, because you had a lot of old thinking that really needed to change. And probably around maybe I'd say 2015, 2016, they were really starting to get into a good cadence with taking on a sprint mentality and being able to turn things around every 2 to 3 weeks, new functionality, and the days of taking 6 or 7 months to deliver a product really was gone. So it took a while, and it's a big machine, it's a big company. There was certainly a lot of proof of concepts, but really to get all parts of the business humming at the same time really took an effort. So they're in a much better place than they were 8, 9 years ago from that perspective.
That's interesting. And Arman, what can you tell about the time frame since you started thinking about why don't we do something about this problem, and until you actually decided and ran this sprint?
Actually, what's interesting in my case is that it started kind of the wanting to apply that solution to a problem started before a problem came along for me, because I've been constantly reading about things in design and UX and for months, and I've constantly been bumping into the design sprint concept, and then all of a sudden one day a problem came where we needed to kick off that product, and I realized that the design sprint is something that I've been reading for so many months is actually the perfect the perfect time to test this
to utilize this
idea.
capability.
Yeah, so I think the once I had the problem, once I realized that the design sprint it might be helpful, I think it was maybe a couple of weeks until I was able to convince everyone.
Okay. I see. Matt, do you have any experience where you can share with there was a journey from starting to realize there is a problem to the point where we know what to do, let's start doing it?
Yeah, I think every day in corporate America is kind of like that. There's a lot of, I'll say, realization of problems, but it takes time for them sometimes to be acted upon, right? I'm guessing, Jeff probably has some similar experiences, where he's coming from in corporate America. Because I was kind of, listening to Arman's answer just now and Jeff's answer about, agile and waterfall. And I think, the large and the small organizations have a desire and a need for the agile approach, but for different reasons. I think, in a small company, it provides a sense of structure and process. And I think in the corporate larger companies, it actually helps break down that traditional, too slow to move, get things done structure, right? It helps allow for more iterative and faster response and course correction and things like that. So, I'm not giving you a specific example necessarily, Natalie, but, one of the observations I was about to actually chime in on when you asked that question of me was just that, that I don't know if it's a divergence or, just that need for, a different methodology for very different purposes.
Interesting. I wanted to mention, we mentioned quite several times already agile principles, and I want to mention that both myself and Marla, and Jeff, I guess, right? We are all members of a community called Princeton Agile or Princeton Agility, where we meet once a month. Usually it's the last Wednesday of the month in the evening. And people who are meeting are agile practitioners, scrum masters, agile coaches. I cannot think of any project manager, because if you start being project manager and you engage with agile, you transfer into someone else, like a product manager.
Mm-hmm.
So people who practice agile, some people who are looking for jobs on agile, but mostly people who already hold positions and people who want to share experiences, learn from each other. A very interesting and engaging group, and I highly recommend this group for anyone interested to know all there is about agile in practice, in networking.
I think that's a great comment. And, coming from, a large corporation, people who are skilled and experienced as scrum masters and some of the other key roles in agile, companies are looking for those kind of people. Large companies are looking for those kind of people in a bad way, because they really need to change culture. And sometimes the best way to do that is find someone from the outside who can help.
Yeah, that's what's happening. Okay, Marla, back to you, I guess.
Great. I shared a bunch of links in the chat just now, and one of them is to the Princeton Agility Meetup group. So, we're getting to the end, but I had one more question for Arman and then one for Jeff, and then Natalie, I'll turn it over to you. Arman, I'm curious, how does someone stay current on new methodologies and approaches? It sounds like you have your go-to sources and you've been reading about design sprints for a while before you took it on as the approach that you wanted to use. So do you have recommendations for people in general?
Yeah. So I guess my main sources are usually like newsletters, and like industry specific and domain specific newsletters, YouTube videos. I love watching videos. Like I said, I end up binging them for way too long. And one of my favorites is like a Chrome. There's tons of different Chrome extensions that you can install that basically turn your new tab into a newsletter. So, for example, for design, there's one called Muesli, Muzli, I think. And it basically just pulls up a bunch of different articles from a bunch of different sources that talk about design or something related to that. And that's actually how I really found out about Design Sprint in the first place. Yeah, those are my main ways.
Okay, great.
Can you put this into the chat, Arman? The link to this resource.
Sure, yeah. That's design specific, but sure.
Great. And then Jeff, I was just going to ask, what did you find to be the most interesting part of your experience in implementing, data quality management in the example you shared with us?
Sure. I think for me, it was probably the discovery phase, right? So yes, we solved the problem, certainly with some of those big ticket items I mentioned from a data quality perspective, but I think it was the going under the covers in seeing, while they were data challenges, they were also opportunities, right? To clean up a lot of the information, work with our partners, both in IT as well as the data stewards, data owners, in an effort to take those challenges, those opportunities, and get them identified and get them hopefully corrected where folks downstream, the business could use them for insights or doing data science initiatives, providing products and services to the customers, all those things. So it was really just the discovery of what was going on with the data and where the opportunities lie.
Interesting. Cool. Well, good. Well, thank you. And thank you both so much for sharing all of this great information and insights. And thanks everyone who participated. And it's been good meeting people we haven't met before and good seeing people we know. Natalie, I'm going to put up the slide and turn it to you to kind of close this session.
Barbara, you want to say something?
I just have a quick question about the muesli. I just pulled that up, and it feels like, and I don't really use it, but it feels kind of Pinterest-like. Is that kind of what it does? It's kind of a board of all the different resources for that particular.
Yeah, it's funny because I don't know anything about Pinterest, but
yeah,
it looks like Pinterest, but it's like a curated collection of articles constantly updated related to design.
Okay, so it picks the articles for you, whereas in Pinterest people are saving them. That's
it picks it for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
While Marley is sharing the screen, Adriel, a quick question to you. How did you learn about this event? Are you a member of Meetup, a Meetup group?
Yeah, so for the program I did this year, it's under Design Lab. I'm assigned a mentor, and then to keep me on track and to keep everything on track for like hitting my career goals, I do maybe 1 to 2 workshops every 2 weeks. And I'm looking for workshops that will give me more knowledge and help me out if everything's out. I also thought that this was a good opportunity to, hear from maybe people in different industries about solving complex problems. It's interesting to hear like Jeff speak or the guys from corporate America, because there's a lot of carryover. I'm learning that today of like Agile and Scrum and how problems are addressed and solved.
And how did you find us? Through Meetup?
Oh, yes, through Meetup. I have an account, so I use Meetup to join the groups.
Okay. So stay tuned. We have many other interesting events. We are announcing them on Meetup. If anyone here, guys, are not yet members of our meetup.com group, please join, because we try to advertise all the events we're having on Meetup. So that is one single source of all events information. Besides events, Mr. Simon mainly, what Mr. Simon does, he helps prepare you for a job interview. And right now you can hear him ask most frequently asked questions. You can answer these questions, then listen to your recordings, read guidance, recommendations for each answer, how he suggests you should answer them. We are currently working on the next feature of Mr. Simon. It is still being in active brainstorms, but I hope we will move forward with it. And the idea is, and this is something where I would like to hear what you guys think. The idea is the next offering that Mr. Simon can offer is to help you do the company research. If you know what company you are going to go for an interview, and you know ideally the job description, the position and job description, you would provide that information to Mr. Simon, and he will generate you personalized recommendations how you should answer these questions based on the information about the company available and also the job description. What do you think? Would that be something that would be helpful if these recommendations were not just some generic recommendations, but very much tailored per company, company's culture, values, and also the position and job description? What do you think? would that be helpful in an interview preparation? What do you think?
I think it would be valuable. I think the challenge would be maintaining currency. But it sounds like you're up for challenge. Because companies change, cultures tend to change, and you have to make sure you get, I'll say just-in-time information.
The up-to-date information. Yeah,
Right.
culture, it doesn't change like every day, and values, right? It does, but not that often, I guess.
Right. You just don't want to get caught, I guess, in a change. When a company's working to change culture and strategy and direction, and you have, I'll say, the legacy content.
Interesting. That's a good insight. Thanks.
But I like the idea of it overall. I think it could definitely add value.
Thank you. What do you think, Jeff?
So I assume, I'm trying to think along the lines of what Matt is saying, keeping it current, not letting it get stale, or having an old, 3 corporate statements from, 10 years ago, showing up. So I'm just trying to think of how you're collecting this information in the first place, whether, again, you're crawling the web, looking for it, aggregating it, and vetting it, and keeping it current. Just trying to understand how that. I mean, it's great information, to Matt's point, if it's kept current, and it's good to use, because again, we all know that that's one of the things you need to do as you're getting ready for your job interview, is to understand the culture and be able to talk at it on an interview.
That's a great point. Actually, we need to, I didn't think about it. We need to make sure we only take into account the most recent, latest information about the company, because indeed the culture may be different from what it was 15 years ago. Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you.
I think it's not just 15 years ago. I think, we're at a point where that agile ideas, those agile ideas also apply to the way companies are changing the way they do business in a much more rapid, contemporary, they stay contemporary kind of way. So it's probably not just 15 years. It could be 1 or 2 years or 3 years at most sometimes, depending on the industry, depending on the company.
That's a great insight. So I really hope that we can meet sometime in near future, and this would be one of the topics I really want to know more about. Okay, if that's okay, Matt.
Happy to, and would welcome others in the conversation, because I do not want to be the only voice, because I have my experiences, and there's probably many of them here.
Yeah, that's I totally agree. That would be an interesting conversation for us to have. Okay, so this is part of what Mr. Simon offers. Mostly it is an app, free at this point, helping you prepare for a job interview, but we're also doing events like this one and others, and stay tuned on meetup.com. Okay, Marla, back to you.
Beauty.
On